Yo, what's up, friends? Welcome to the Reversion. It's good to be back. Glad you decided to join me tonight here on a Friday evening. I am excited to get into this topic tonight. It's something that I've been wanting to do a live deep dive on for quite a bit of time now. And I'm hoping that I've got enough material. I think I actually have too much material, if anything. So we might even have to parse through some of the excess stuff that I've got. I have a lot of research on this topic, something that kind of intersects with my own research. And, it's been discussed on the other podcast I've done on Mormonism. So I would encourage you to go back and listen to those. I did a couple with Drew, who is an ex-Mormon, and he knows a lot about this stuff. But I was looking for something to kind of do another deep dive on because I've been kind of overdue. I think this is my second stream of the year. So, I was a bit overdue to get on here and just check in with you guys, give you guys some content, give the people what they want. It's good to see you guys in the chat. I see ID Bro, Oscar, welcome on in, guys. Appreciate you being here. Jacob, I think we're just on YouTube tonight, so it'll be kind of a cozy evening. I did want to thank, before we get into it here, I apologize for just touching base on a few what do they call them? Household items, housekeeping. I don't know what the kids call these things. I want to say thank you to a bunch of people who have donated while I was offline. We've got, I'll just mention first names here. Actually, do I have usernames? I want to give some shout outs as they're due. We've got, let's see here. Well, these are anonymous ones here. I got Wilhelm. I have to thank Wilhelm. Sent a big $100 donation. I appreciate that so much. He says, please pray for me. Please pray for Wilhelm. We've got Seraphim tipped $200. Amazing fat donation there from Seraphim. So thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate that. That goes quite a long way in allowing me to do what I do here. He says, my brother in Christ, amazing work. I'm keeping you in my prayers. May God grant you many years. Thank you so much, brother. That's amazing. Huge blessing from Seraphim there. Shout out to Seraphim. And then we've got Colin Burney. We've got Seraphim. Yeah, I said Seraphim. Okay. Sorry if I doxed anyone there. I think we're good, though. Those are usernames. Father James. Thank you so much, Father James, for the big order on my website there on the Reversion store. So, okay, we've got that out of the way. I just had to do that. I wanted to do that first because I owe you guys thank yous for supporting my work. One more thing before we get into it here. I just published an article today. Let me share the screen and show you what we've got. It's, I guess, kind of related. I mean, it's not about Joseph Smith or Mormonism, but let's switch over to the screen here. This is what I published today. So it's called Mystical Resistance, How the Zohar Hijacked Christianity to Destroy It. Now, this, I think, is the spiciest article I've posted to date. And I was thinking about covering this on the stream tonight, but I already have a warning on my YouTube channel from, of all things, posting a video of Father Seraphim Rose reading from the protocols. So I have a strike on my channel. I don't know if it's a strike or a warning, if it's the same thing, but I'm on the naughty list on YouTube already. I've got a strike on my channel, and so I figured it's best to just keep this on Substack. I'm not saying anything inflammatory. I'm literally just posting. This is all academic research I did, so I'm citing directly from academic sources and directly from the Zohar. So I'm a little bit critical. I insert some of my critical tone, but it's mostly, I mean, you can see all the citations here. I'll actually take you to the bottom because this is paywalled, but you can see I've got 30 citations in this article, and these are all Jewish scholars. So there's no inflammatory remarks here, but the nature of the content is like really, it's really spicy because, it's about the destruction of Edom. And we all know who Edom is. It's Christendom. So anyway, go check that out. It's on the reversion.co. And now that we've got all that stuff out of the way, we will jump into our content for tonight. So I apologize to those who are watching this afterwards and you had to sit through all that, but let's get into our deep dive. I will switch over again to, sorry, I'm a little slow on this. I'm a little rusty because it's been a while. Okay, and I hope my audio is okay too. I just upgraded the audio because I was doing a book club meetings and having a lot of trouble streaming the audio from Discord. It's a big headache. And so again, thank you guys for the donations because it allowed me to buy relatively expensive audio software so I could once and for all settle these audio issues. Okay, let's switch here. All right, and I'll share my resources too for this stuff. So what we're looking at here is kind of, I put together a compilation of, I tried to throw together something relatively organized here, and I've got a bunch of quotes and some text to kind of just contextualize what we're covering. So these are mostly excerpts from the various sources that I have on these topics. And one thing I'll say, just as we begin this exploration together, this is quite a rabbit hole, to say the least. And like I said earlier, a lot of this intersects with my research that I am doing for the book I'm writing on Kabbalah's influence on Protestant movements, on millenarian movements throughout the from the 16th century to basically the 19th century. And a lot of this intersects. So I noticed that in the larger works that cover Joseph Smith and his occult connections, they start where I'm starting in my book. They all start at the Renaissance. That's a common theme that you see. And it's just very obvious why start at the Renaissance, because that's when this transmission began. So, you pick up a book about Joseph Smith and chapter 1, you're starting in the Renaissance, you might be a little confused, but it's important because otherwise you're going to have no idea how this stuff even ended up in America. How did Kabbalah end up in America? Why are these Anglo-Protestants syncretizing Kabbalah into their eschatology, right? You have to kind of know how that got there first, so... Yeah, well, Elijah,
I washed my magic underwear for this one.
Nice. Glad you got some clean undies there, Elijah. Thank you for the dono. Appreciate that, man. And I got to disable the Nightbot thing. So yeah, it's a long transmission over the course of 4 centuries at least before you get to Joseph Smith, and so. I can actually show you guys one of the really good, I would say I would use this as a primary source on this subject in particular. Let me go to the first page here. So we're looking at, this is called The Refiner's Fire. And I actually just started reading this today, and I was like, wow, this almost reads exactly like the first chapter of my book, because I do have it. I have at least the first chapter. I'm pretty set on, and so, if you look here, and look at the chapters, right? I always like to look at the chapters before I even start reading the book, but you can't really, they're not great titles for the chapters, but so he's covering the alchemical marriage. That was in the 17th century. So, I mean, he's starting 2 centuries before Mormonism, because you have to follow this transmission. And so, I kind of skimmed through the first chapter. Sorry for all the scrolling here. Now, let's just start here. And it's like the story of the Mormons, right? And then the second page, he's talking about, I guess like the third page, he's starting with the Reformation. He's talking about the Renaissance. All right, so there's some really good quotes in here. The rise of Protestantism was only one of a series of fault lines racking the spiritual life of Reformation Europe, fault lines involving claims to divine immanence, the popular practices of magic, and the esoterica of Hermetic divinization. Protestants, especially Calvinists, were far from thorough in their purging of Christianity as its extreme. Protestant spiritual life was reduced to the believer, Bible in hand and lectured by preachers, facing in fearful isolation of the uncertainties of predestination at the hands of an omnipotent God. Great writing. Yeah, so it's like, it's got some great quotes. He's setting the stage for how all these millenarian sectarian groups came about that were synthesizing Hermeticism and Kabbalah and different magical practices. It seems mostly to be Neoplatonic Hermetic Kabbalah. So it's there. It's in every book that does this more comprehensive deep dive. You see the same people, you see the same transmission. They start at the same time, right? They're mentioning a lot of the same connections. So the alchemical wedding, this was a big kind of turning point. And so here, this is where my book starts. He's talking about Marsilio Ficino, Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, right? These were the guys that introduced the Hermetic philosophy into Europe, essentially, and brought it into the Renaissance and made it basically a principle, the principle of
appreciate all of you do.
Thank you, man.
God bless you.
I'm having a hard time reading these. $10. Thank you, Seeker. I appreciate that. I appreciate all you do by tuning in, man. Thank you. It's good to see you guys back in here. So yeah, it's, like I said, yeah, they all start the same place. So he's talking about how Ficino was working on the translation of Plato's entire corpus, and he was told by Cosimo de' Medici to set them aside to instead focus all his efforts on translating the Corpus Hermeticum when it arrived in Florence. So that's just, a very important, I'm including that in my book as well. It's a very important thing to know, because that really shows you how much dominance that Prisca Theologia concept had in the Renaissance. That here they had the entire corpus of Plato is being translated into Latin for the first time, and they got a more important text of this Corpus Hermeticum, which is the writings of the Egyptian mystic Hermes Trismegistus, who's a mythical character. They didn't know that at the time. They thought he was a real person connected to Moses. But anyway, and this is relevant to what we're talking about. I mean, this isn't a book about Joseph Smith here. And it seems like it's really off, but you have to know that Joseph Smith was doing the same thing these Renaissance Neoplatonists were. So he was synthesizing the same stuff: Hermeticism, Kabbalah, different Gnostic traditions, and Egyptian mystery religions. So this is how it all entered. This was the gateway into Europe, was through the Renaissance Church of Rome. And so that just shows you how important Prisca Theologia was, that they had what they perceived to be one of the most important texts to translate to Latin, and it was in the process of being translated into Latin by Ficino. And once the Corpus Hermeticum arrived in Florence, they dropped everything. And this is, by the way, funded by Cosimo de' Medici, who funded the entire Renaissance. He was a banking mogul of the Medici banking family. And so he was funding the Platonic Academy that Ficino was the head of, and so Ficino was involved in all the translation work. So anyway, that's kind of, that's an important starting point because that's how it all happened. And so how does Kabbalah enter into the mix? Kabbalah comes in because they were like, well, we were considering Prisca Theologia just in a like a pagan sense, right? So they found the Corpus Hermeticum, they discover it, and they're like, we found it. We've fulfilled Prisca Theologia. But they didn't go far back enough because they weren't considering that, or maybe they were, but they didn't attain any of the ancient Hebrew texts that predated Moses. And so once the Kabbalah arrived, they did the same thing they did with not entirely, but it took the throne of Prisca Theologia over the Hermetic corpus because it was perceived to be even more ancient than the writings of Hermes Trismegistus. So that's a little bit of context going all the way back to the beginning. And like I said, he starts there too in this book. So he's talking, again, it's like 3 pages he's talking about this, how the Florentine syncretism. And so this is where it all entered. Both Hermeticism and Mormonism celebrate the mutuality of spiritual and material worlds, pre-created intelligences of free will, a divine Adam. Okay, that's the Adam Kadmon. A sinless fall, and the symbolism and religious efficacy of marriage and sexuality. Okay, that's like a very common theme in the esoteric traditions. Is like this very esoteric view on sexuality as being the merging of opposites, and so they always synthesize sexuality into all this stuff. And of course, it comes in the form of sexual depravity and degeneracy, of course. And as in Hermeticism, Adam, the father of all, prince of all, that ancient of days, would occupy in a central position in the Mormon cosmology. So they're calling Adam the ancient of days. 3 centuries after the height of the Renaissance, Mormonism echoed the Hermetics and explicitly rejected Calvinism in its advocacy of a universal salvation and the freedom of the will, its replacement of the doctrine of original sin with that of the fortunate fall, and its denial of the efficacy of grace alone. In granting priestly powers to seal up the saints unto eternal life, Joseph Smith gave the Mormon hierarchy the same authority that the Hermetic alchemist assumed: human means to immortality, indeed divinity. Okay, and that echoes what we see with the transhumanists today, who are essentially the modern digital alchemists, right? So they're all after this kind of immortality and like self-divinization, this apotheosis. And we'll see that in Mormonism, and we're actually, as Orthodox, we're accused of this frequently by people who don't understand our soteriology, but they'll say that theosis and the Mormon version of theosis, which we'll see is actually apotheosis, are similar, or they're the same thing, which is not true. But this was one of the things that some of these scholars critique about Smith's framework, is that, that's one of the things they attribute to the Gnostic influence, is his concept of his idea of theosis, which I don't even want to call it theosis just to avoid confusion, because it's not. But some of the scholars do call it that, but they're not, keep in mind, these aren't Orthodox scholars. And so he's talking about Joachim Fiore, another important figure. And again, he was a 12th century figure, Joachim Fiore. So why is that coming up? Because Joachim Fiore established this eschatological framework and was essentially the first dispensationalist understanding of history and the eschaton. So that all goes back to the 12th century. Father Seraphim Rose has talked in depth about Joachim Fiore in the Orthodox Survival Course. We won't get into that here, but it's another thing I'm pointing out in my book as well, because that's kind of the eschatological understanding and presupposition that a lot of these millenarian cults developed or applied their synthesis to. So it's basically a tripartite dispensationalist framework where there's an age of the Father, an age of the Son, and an age of the Spirit, right? And so the theory is that we are in the age of the Spirit now, and so that's kind of what set the precedence for all these spiritualist movements in these various Protestant sects that developed after the Reformation. Cotel Raid, let's go. Yo, what's up, Cotel friends? Welcome on in. I still don't know how raids work. I want to try to raid some people, but I don't even know. I'm such a YouTube noob. I don't even know how that works. But thank you for the raid, Cotel. Appreciate it, man. Yeah, welcome on in, friends. We're just reading for those joining us here. I mean, you could see by the title, but we're just getting into it here. I'm reading through this. I'm not reading through this book. I'm just showing some of this text from the book, The Refiner's Fire, The Making of Mormon Cosmology, which is an extensive kind of overview of how the Mormon religion developed all this syncretism. And so, yeah, like I said, he's tracing this all the way back to the Renaissance, as I do as well, and as a lot of these researchers do, because that's just clearly the starting point of this transmission. So, and, you know, there's a lot of good stuff in this. I do recommend this book. Because he goes into a lot of the stuff that I do, and you can really get a more comprehensive, not a more comprehensive, but a more concise overview of this transmission, because I think he only covers it in one chapter. He does a great job of it, but you know, there's still a lot to be said about these things. He's kind of smashing it all into one. So you can see here, he's now in the 17th century already. So.
At HidBro0 donated $19.99 through Super Chat. Thanks, man.
Yo, thank you, ID Bro. Appreciate that, man. Thank you for the 20. Appreciate all the support, guys. Thank you so much. So, yeah, you can see here he's already in the 16th century, or the 17th century, talking about the Valentinian alchemists, right? And the Paracelsian alchemist. So he's done that in a whole chapter. He's already kind of breezing through the centuries here. Now he's on John D. So again, you can just follow this transmission in the first chapter. Now, this is a core concept that I'm highlighting in my book as well. This notion of the universal and general reformation of the whole wide world, which appeared in the Rosicrucian manifestos, written by John Valentin Andre. And this was kind of the global Reformation as it's worded there. It's like they had this idea that the Reformation needs to apply to the entire world.
At Octavian 33 donated $19.99 through Super Chat. Thanks for all your work.
Thank you for all your support, Octavian. Thank you, man. I really appreciate the 20s, guys, and appreciate all the love. It's a very warm welcome, because I've been away for, well, I haven't been away, I've been here, but I've just been immersed in research. I've been locked in, getting a lot of writing done. So thank you so much, guys.
At CP6 Suja donated RSD 1000 through Super Chat. You're doing the Lord's work, brother. Thank you.
Thank you, man. I don't know what that is. I don't know what RSD is or how much that is, but I really appreciate it. Thank you, CP6UGA, man. Thank you so much, brother. If that's a lot of money, forgive me. I have no idea. I don't even know what that is. RSD. Is that a crypto? I don't even know what that is, man. I'm a retard. That's probably something really obvious. So the Rosicrucian, you know, this was a big part of this whole general reformation of the world, right? And so, like, I'm tentatively, my book is titled it's kind of titled what my articles are. It's it's something to do with the reformation of the reformation of the world. So I'm kind of hijacking that term, but that's the Rosicrucian kind of rally cry, you know. So you had Prisca Theologia, then it kind of evolves into let's reform the entire world, right? And so again, this is all just important to know the context here. So look at what he's saying. One of the Rosicrucian texts, the Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz by André, was intended to invest the marriage of German Frederick and English Elizabeth with mystical and apocalyptical implications, and to provide a millennial ideology of Protestant alliance against the Catholic Habsburgs. So this marriage was symbolic because, think about it, right? You had the German Frederick and the English Elizabeth, and they were and what were the two countries that were kind of like doing? They were at the forefront of the Protestant Revolution. It was Germany and England. What just happened? My mic went out. Yeah, here we go with the audio stuff. I don't know how long ago my mic cut out, but hopefully the audio is coming through okay. I was basically just saying that, this is symbolic. Think about at the forefront of the Reformation, you had Germany and England. These were where all the leaders of the Reform movement were coming from, and then they kind of merged together in the Rosicrucian order. And that eventually develops into Freemasonry. So, and I think he talks about that. So, yeah, we're not going to go over this whole text, but I thought this was good foundational stuff before we actually get into the Mormon stuff, because there's some things that you do have to know to some degree. And so if there's anything that I think might need some context, I'll try my best here. But, yeah, I just want you to take a look at some of these names, right? Von Helmont. Okay, von Helmont was a hugely influential and way lesser known figure in the 17th century in appropriating Kabbalah into Protestant circles, as was, I wonder if he mentions him here, the author of the Kabbalah Denundata. You had John Dury. Yeah, so these guys were like these Hebraists that were, kind of early millenarians. John Milton, deeply esoteric figure. If you look at his art and his poetry, it's very dark, very Kabbalistic. But what's his name? Roth, not Rosenroth. Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think it's Nor von Rosenroth, I think is his name, who wrote the Kabbalah Denundata, which is like the modern, that's like what still occultists to this day use as their primary text of Kabbalah. And it was actually first translated by a Lutheran named von Rosenroth? Yeah, I think it was von Rosenroth, if I'm not mistaken. And so, yeah, you get some context here. Here's talking about the Hartlib Circle, Anabaptist Reformation. And he does make it clear that these were, and like as I am in my book, this was a minority of Protestants. It's not like the entire Protestant movement was all these crypto Kabbalists or something. No honest historian would make that argument, and you guys shouldn't either. If you only know this stuff from my work, and that's what you got out of it, then I didn't do my job in those articles. I wouldn't say that the entire Reformation, like all the main figures, the magisterial reformers, as they call them, the primary guys, were these crypto Kabbalists. But it's besides the point, because what emerged from there was all these sects that were synthesizing these esoteric concepts, Paracelsian alchemy, Kabbalah, Hermeticism, right? And the point of the Reformation aspect is that it allowed that to flourish. That's, I think, the honest take on it, is that it enabled it and allowed it to flourish, right? It didn't really you didn't have the ecclesiastical guardrails to stop this stuff in a way that is consequential. So that's why it's no coincidence that the Reformation like opened the floodgates for all this syncretism. And that's why I get frustrated when people are like overly fixated on Martin Luther. Like, oh, what was Martin Luther into? Was he a crypto Jew? Was he a crypto Kabbalist? It's like, it doesn't really matter. It's because what he did allowed this to happen. It doesn't matter if he himself was an occultist or something. So here he's talking about the Quakers, right? So now he's already in America. George Fox, again, all highly influential figures in this transmission. So he does this all in a chapter. I thought it was very impressive because, there's a lot to cover. I mean, all this stuff is like deserving of its own book, all these people he's covering. So here we get into Mormonism. And so again, why did he cover all of that? Because that's what the Puritans brought with them to America. That's what the early colonialists brought with them, at least in the the eastern coast part, like the Massachusetts Bay colony, right? And like, I'm not saying that it was the entire all of Americas. It was just in that region. It turns out it was a hotbed of Protestant revolutionary activity. And what we'll see here is where the Mormon movement developed was in the burned over district, which also happened to be a huge hotbed for all of these Protestant millenarian cults that are still around today, such as the Adventists, the Mormons, what's his name? That crazy, I'm blanking on this guy's name. He's like this crazy, he was like one of the OG, like evangelical doomsday preachers. I'll probably see his name in the text here, but the point is a lot of cults came out of the burned over district where Mormonism came from. This is upstate New York. So I'm going to switch back over to my notes here. And we'll finally get into this. Sorry, let me just catch up on chat before. Make sure I'm keeping up with things here. What are you guys talking about? Von Rosenroth, yeah. No, actually, he wasn't. Von Rosenroth was in Anglo. I don't think he was a converso. You would think so by that name, but let me just make sure that's his name. I'm pretty sure that's it. Christian Nor von Rosenroth. I'll show you before we get into this here. This is Christian Nor von Rosenroth. So they're introducing him on Wikipedia as a Christian Hebraist and Christian Kabbalist. That's like what he's known for. And he wrote the Kabbalah Denundata. A lot of this Kabbalistic imagery that you see, if you like look up images of Kabbalistic cosmology, they were derived from Christian von Rosenroth in his Kabbalah Denundata. So it's like, how did that get right? It's obvious that there was some kind of chain of transmission, right? So this guy, there's a ton of academic research on this guy here, and he was in the circle of Van Helmont, again another just lesser known figure. His father was a renowned alchemist, and so he grew up as an alchemist and then discovered Kabbalah and was a hugely influential figure in the dissemination of Kabbalah throughout England and Germany, especially. So again, I get into this in my book. He kind of was involved in the Anne Conway Ragley Hall Circle, which was a circle of Protestant Kabbalists. So, I would say this was at the height of being able to definitively trace the transmission of Kabbalah within Protestant circles. After I would say the mid 17th century, kind of like after this circle started to fizzle out, it becomes harder to trace because a lot of it becomes like secondhand, or it becomes like, basically the overall thing is that it became so infused and synthesized among these different movements that it becomes harder to identify. So that's why you have to kind of know you have to follow the transmission and kind of understand what Kabbalah and alchemy teaches. And then you are able to identify them. And then that way it's like, you don't need them to, it is in the realm of speculation, but you don't need them to say explicitly that they're Kabbalists. You can just kind of identify like, oh, well, he probably picked up these ideas from this guy or this movement that he came from, right? So it does become a little bit more speculative. And so that's why it's important to actually have a trace of this line of transmission, because it definitely, we know that it doesn't just go away. We know it doesn't, the whole notion of using Kabbalah in Christian theology, it just doesn't stop, because what happens in the Americas, you have all these movements that you start to see Kabbalah resurface again. It's like, did they revive it, or was it there all along? So that, again, that's just a little bit of a side. We'll get back to the subject at hand here. And I do want to thank, I don't know if, you guys are still in here from the DPH stream, but I forgot, but I wanted to thank DPH again, because he posted the video of him reading my article on this, which I wrote last year. And I haven't really looked at it in a while, but I'm sure that if I did, I would wish that there's nothing in there that's inaccurate, but there's maybe some slight things that could be tweaked a little bit, but overall, like, I think that it's still pretty solid. And now that I've been researching this extensively for over a year, like, those articles were kind of the start of my research. So there were some gaps in the research on that article that I'm going to be filling in extensively in the book. So that's why it's been taking me so long. But I wanted to thank him, because I got a nice kind of boost in my subscribers from that. So thank you to DPH for that. So all right, let's get into it here. The traditional narrative of Mormonism's founding presents Joseph Smith as an unlettered farm boy who, through divine providence alone, produced the Book of Mormon and restored ancient Christianity. Okay, so there's that idea of restoration of an ancient concept, right, of an ancient teaching. This account, carefully cultivated since the 1830s, has served apologetic purposes, but does not withstand critical historical scrutiny. As Dr. Michael Quinn documented in his seminal Early Mormonism and the Magical Worldview, that's another fantastic text that's very similar to the one I just showed you, where he follows the same exact transmission, starts at the Renaissance, follows all these figures. The evidence demonstrates that Smith and his family were deeply embedded in a magic worldview that permeated early American culture, and that this magical context profoundly shaped Mormon's origins. And so here's again, this is going to be a lot of quotes. Like, I'll just kind of show you what we're looking at here. I've got a lot of material, so I'll try my best here to just keep things concise, keep things moving. But I just kind of went overboard with like all the excerpts that I collected here. So all right, let me just skim before I decide to read these. In attempting to understand Joseph Smith and his religious vision, historians have examined both the religious sparks kindled by his time and the social soils from which the young prophet sprang. As useful as some of these efforts have been, I still agree with Paul Edwards. Our methods so far have been too traditional and unimaginative to comprehend Joseph's story. We remain even now blinded by the fears of yesterday, or biased by its enormous judgments. Chief among the subjects that might be feared in Mormon history is Joseph's apparent recurrent association with occult traditions of Western spirituality, and this remains the area of his history least examined and understood. It is impossible for me to present fresh evidence which seemingly links Joseph Smith to what might be interpreted as the occult without addressing the wider issue. And so this is kind of a similar quote from Owens. So I think the two primary sources we're going to be looking at here are Owens and Quinn, just for context. So he's starting here in the burned over district. That's what I was just talking about that a little bit. So this is in Western New York, and it served as a volatile crucible for religious innovation. This region was characterized by an intense spiritual fervor where the boundaries between traditional Protestant theology, folk magic, and Western esotericism were constantly blurred. That's exactly what I was trying to say about Kabbalah. That's why it becomes harder to trace after a certain period, which again, I would say I would say around mid 17th century, after the Sabbatean revolution. It becomes a little bit harder to trace for that exact reason. It just becomes really blurred where these traditions are, where they're manifesting, how they're being integrated into these movements. Because they're not really saying like, hey, we got these beliefs from this system or something. It just becomes part of their presuppositions and understanding of their spirituality. So I think a lot of it is at that point just like it's like a subconscious or unconscious transmission at that point. Tolstoy famously described Mormonism as the quintessential American religion, and to understand the sophisticated cosmology developed by Joseph Smith Jr., one must view his restorationist claims through the lens of Jewish mystical thought, specifically Kabbalah, which was surprisingly accessible during this period of high religious creativity. So that just lays to the claim that there was a strong interest in Kabbalah in the Americas in the 19th century, and even before that. You can trace it as far back as the 17th century. The concept of secrecy served as a strategic marketing tool for both Kabbalah and early Mormonism. In both traditions, the claim that certain knowledge was lost. Okay, there's that idea of Prisca Theologia, so it's still present there in the 19th century, or hidden, and recently rediscovered, served as a powerful differentiator in a crowded religious marketplace. By framing their teachings as secret mysteries revealed at Mount Sinai, in the case of Kabbalah, or found in the Golden Plates, in the case of Mormonism, these movements appeared to a 19th century desire for esoteric authority. This perception of exclusivity transformed the seeker into an initiate, promising access to a divine mechanics that traditional public-facing denominations supposedly lacked. These claims of ancient lineage provided a sense of weight and legitimacy to Smith's burgeoning movement, rooted in specific literary and educational channels available to the Smith family. And then here's a list of this is kind of playing into this myth or debunking this myth that he was kind of like this dumb peasant who couldn't read and stuff. Like, look at the family, look at the lineage he came from. This is the Smith family civic engagement. So they were, he had a good handful of his descendants were in high levels of politics and academia. That's basically what that's showing there. And this is getting into this myth of the unlearned boy. Lucy Mack Smith's manuscript, and I think that's his mother, or his Lucy Mack Smith, described her son as a boy. Yeah, this is his mother, who had never read the Bible, though through by course in his life. For Joseph was less inclined to the study of books than any other child we had, but much more given to reflection and deep study. This maternal claim has served the foundation for the unlearned prophet narrative that persists in LDS discourse today. The argument runs like this: how could an uneducated farm boy produce the Book of Mormon without divine assistance? All the Mormons say that. I just saw a Mormon say that last night. I posted something on X. It was like on some Mormon thread, and I posted a video that we're going to watch shortly here about. It's a professor giving a lecture on Smith's influence of Kabbalah. And the guy most of them have no clue about that. They know, most Mormons, at least the ones online that I have interactions with, they know about the ties to Freemasonry, and for the most part, they don't care. They just downplay it, or they'll just play it off like, oh, everyone was a Mason back then, but they don't know about the esoteric stuff that we're covering here. At least the average Mormon doesn't. I know that's for sure. Sorry, I'm just catching up on chat here. Yo, what's up, Crispy? Good to see you, man. Bright, what's up? I see you there. So, evidence against this myth. LDS historian Philip L. Barlow has conducted that Lucy's claim was an exaggeration, at least with respect to young Joseph's Bible reading. Analysis of Smith's earliest account of his first vision shows it was laced with biblical expressions, revealing how thoroughly the boy's mind was steeped in the words and rhythms of the authorized version. Yo, thank you, ID bro, for the $2. Thank you, man. Appreciate that. The claim that Smith probably ignored books available to him is contradicted by evidence that he later quoted from, referred to, and owned numerous books advertised in his neighborhood as a young man. Palmyra's bookstores and lending library provided access to occult handbooks, including Francis Barrett's The Magus. The verified sale of occult handbooks in Palmyra increases the probability that young Joseph had access to occult literature. So if he could read, he was reading occult books. So the question is, could he read? And we know that he was able to read. So that kind of resolves that. I don't know what the LDS refutations to this are. I'm sure they have some, but I'm sure everything else that they do in their apologetics, it's very weak. Family education, William Davis has estimated Smith received approximately 7 full school years of education. His brother Hiram attended Moore's Academy in Hanover, New Hampshire, an institution affiliated with Dartmouth College. Okay, and then when he ended up in Nauvoo, he studied Hebrew and German with Alexander Niebuhr, a Jewish convert who possessed Kabbalistic texts. Okay, I want to stop for a moment here, because this is one of the most common themes that you'll see in this entire centuries-long transmission of Kabbalistic studies within Protestant circle, or just Christian circles, let's say, because there were some Catholics who were the Renaissance Christian Kabbalists were Catholics. Okay, so just to be fair, but there's always Jewish intermediaries involved, because it involves the study of Hebrew. You have to know Hebrew to study Kabbalah, so that involves these Jewish intermediaries who are usually conversos. So they're usually converted Jews to some sect of Christianity, and they end up being affiliated with Christian scholars, and that's how that happens every single time. Just about every single time. I can't think of an instance where that wasn't the case. Thank you, Jonathan. My religion is true because I cannot read. Yeah. Yeah. That's unironically, I think, an interesting, I don't know if it's a powerful apologetic to, Sola Scriptura or against Sola Scriptura, but I happen to like that one. I'm a medieval peasant, and I'm, I have a sub 90 IQ, and I can't read. I'm illiterate, and the printing press hasn't been invented yet. I guess I'll just go to hell. I can't read the Bible for myself, so I don't have the capacity to figure out all the 5 solas by reading the Bible, because I don't even have access to it. That's kind of a good point, actually. That's another theme, right? It's all these guys they're very smart. They're to their credit, these are brilliant thinkers who end up synthesizing the esoteric traditions because they're these big brain guys who are just steeped in all this literature. So, these are really appealing ideas to a high IQ individual. They're not this stuff isn't retarded. It's a lot of really smart people are into this stuff. I deep bro, thank you again for another 5. I didn't see if there's a message there. Oh, okay. Their parents must have been I don't know why it's not reading the thing anymore. Their parents must have been involved in masonry mystery schools with a name like Hiram Abiff. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and that's another interesting thing that you see in like a lot of the Puritans. It's like, why do they all name their kids after these Hebrew names? I mean, you see this with the Amish too today, like the Amish and the Mennonites. They name their kids like Jedediah and like all these like Jewish like Hebrew names and stuff. That's another thing I go over in my book, which actually I think I think that I make the argument that this explains not the name thing, but the kind of rally cry to return to the sources, return to the most ancient text, or, return to the primary source or the original language. That was the precedence for the Reformation biblicism. That was the entire motto of the entire presupposition of biblical scholarship in the Reformation. And so this is why, in my opinion, from what I've gathered, like the strong current of Hebraism is what set the precedence for the Protestants elevating the Masoretic rabbinical translation over the Septuagint. That's at least I make some, I think, substantial evidence to prove that, but it's like, again, they don't explicitly say that, so it just rests in the realm of speculation. It certainly makes sense to me when you understand the context. So Smith's, okay, where are we here? Yeah, so we're talking about this converso, right? Niebuhr. Smith's journal records multiple study sessions at home reciting German with Niebuhr in 1844, reading Hebrew with Niebuhr. Oh, really descriptive journaling there, buddy. Maybe he was kind of retarded. Unless those are just like excerpts or something. Prophetic authority in early Mormonism was validated and mediated through a sophisticated material culture of talismans, stones, and parchments. These objects were utilized to bridge the gap between the mundane and the supernatural, often drawing directly from Solomonic magic found in the greater and lesser keys of Solomon. We'll get into that shortly. And Francis Barrett's The Magus. Did I read this already? Yes, I did. Okay. So here's those 2 books. I mean, these are more recent publications. You can see this one was Aleister Crowley's version. The Magus I'm not as familiar with. It's probably pretty similar. These are, I know the lesser and greater keys of Solomon, like most occult works, are pseudepigraphal. The story to this is that it's believed to be based on these grimoire that were discovered under Solomon's throne. The Kabbalists believe that Solomon was a black magician and he had access to all these spells. I think this contains the names of these 72 demons. And the story is that Solomon was trapping demons in these jars and like having them be like assistants for him or something along those lines. It's been a while since I engaged with that story, but yeah, it's just a bunch of like pseudepigraphal stuff. The Topsfield power structure. So this is about, we kind of covered this already. Again, I don't want to like overdo it with things here. I might have doubled some of these pieces here. So this is about his education and the education of his family. And interesting spelling of Hiram, right? I thought it's usually Hirim, something like that. It's a very Goyish spelling of a Hebrew name. In the early 19th century, Ivy League connections were primary markers of elite social networking rather than isolated frontier existence. The Smith family maintained a sophisticated presence within these circles, specifically at Dartmouth College. Instead of residing in rural isolation, the family occupied the trustee's house on the Dartmouth campus, a clear indicator of institutional favor. Hiram Smith was enrolled in Moore's Indian School, a specialized academic branch of Dartmouth designed for the training of missionaries and scholars. So he had academic education in missions work. Now, again, I'm going to reference my most previous podcast that I did with, his name is Drew, who is an ex-Mormon, and he goes over some really interesting stuff about how the modern, like today's Mormon missionaries are affiliated with this big corporation that specializes in door-to-door sales, who funded someone in chat probably knows the name. It's the name of the Utah Jazz basketball stadium. Whatever that name of that stadium is, that's the company behind it. They're like heavily affiliated in the LDS church. They donate like multiple millions of dollars per year. And so the family's integration into, did I just read that? Okay. So there's some kind of crossover with Yale, right? They're medical students. Dr. Nathan Smith's resurrectionist activities were not acts of poverty. Okay. So not as important here, but the point here is that it's all debunking this claim that Joseph Smith was this, simple boy who couldn't read. He was a simple guy, right? And it's like he comes from this lineage of academics and civil authorities. So they were well connected, the Smith family. The unlearned boy narrative served to emphasize the miraculous nature of Smith's revelations. Critical analysis reveals instead a young man immersed in the magical religious culture of his time with access to relevant literature and mentors. And we're going to look at what kind of books that he had access to as well. So this is about folk magic in the Smith family. The Smith family's participation in folk magic extended across generations and was documented by contemporaries long before such claims became polemically useful. So you, as a Mormon, you have to argue that, well, I'm sure you could do several mental gymnastics routines to kind of dance around this stuff. But like one of the things you would have to argue is that Joseph Smith ended this line of transmission of these generational practices of magic, which we know for a fact he didn't, because treasure digging is exactly one of these folk magic practices, and so is the seer stone. The whole means by which he allegedly translated the golden tablets was all folk magic rituals. He was using, and we're going to get into that too. So maybe I'll kind of skip forward a little bit here, but this is basically just connecting his family to being involved with these folk magic practices. So it didn't just start with Joseph Smith, basically, here. And here's some of their magical artifacts. So some of these were actually discovered. I think one of these, here's the seer stone. That's the exact seer stone that he used. Joseph Smith likely used his brown seer stone while translating the Book of Mormon. His wife, Emma Smith, is believed to have made the leather pouch for the stone's safekeeping. Bro, it's a rock. This bro thinks that he invented a new religion with a rock. So here's another artifact. It's a talisman that he has of, it's known as the Jupiter talisman. And this is the same symbols that you see in the book, the Magus, that occult book that I just showed earlier. So these same symbols appear in that book. I don't know how a Mormon gets around this stuff. I'm sorry. I don't know how. See, you don't even have to go to like all these, like, it's such a waste of time to go into these biblical debates with Mormons and like getting like disputing over translations and interpretations like you do with a Protestant. It doesn't even make sense. You can just completely dismantle this entire religion by just showing how he stole all this stuff from esoteric traditions. This was a parchment that he had. The English reads, Lord, bless me and keep me. Lord, make his face shine upon me. Okay, so this is that a psalm? We say that in the liturgy, I think. This is known as the Jehovah, Jehovah, Jehovah parchment. So that's like a reference to the divine names, which is a concept, that's one of the primary concepts of Christian Kabbalah, that the divine name, the tetragrammaton, points to the Trinity. But it's not just that, though. It's like this whole, like, gets into gematria and like decoding the divine name and all this stuff. So like some of it seems true, but it's like it gets into all this, Kabbalistic hermeneutics. This is the Urim and Thummim that he used. They called it the Urim and Thummim. And so, as you guys know, these are what the Masonic pillars are named after. His glasses that he used, I guess, and then the box that is that the box he kept the plates in? I don't know. I don't even think there were plates. So this just explains a little bit of this stuff.
@HidBro0 donated $9.99 through Super Chat. The idea of the Kabbalistic texts/concepts propagating through the different Protestant cults reminds me of the cults 100 years later New Age/Gnostic, same concepts propagating.
I cut you off. Yeah, exactly though. Thank you for the 10, ID bro. Yeah, you still see it today. And that's basically my question to people who kind of like doubt this transmission occurred, is like, how did it end up in these modern movements that you see? One of the things I reference in my article that I think I might ditch this thing. I might ditch this argument, if you want to call it that, because it's just very hard to support. But my suspicion originally was that this is the Protestant. You see this especially in like Reformed circles. This emphasis on Shekinah as the manifestation of God's glory in the Old Testament. This is the term Shekinah does not appear anywhere in the Hebrew Old Testament. In the Hebrew language, it comes from these rabbinical texts and primarily Kabbalah. So that would be something that it's like, that's kind of as far as you can go with that, and be like, well, that's just at least interesting. That, like, where did that come from? How did these Protestants learn this word that is primarily in the Kabbalah? It's nowhere to be found. If you study Hebrew to learn the Old Testament, you're not going to learn about that word. You're not going to find that word anywhere. So that's why I had it in there. But it's not saying that the concept of God's glory manifesting on earth in some form is Kabbalistic. It's just that phrasing of calling it the Shekinah, because Shekinah has this deeply, it's pretty central to Kabbalah. It's like one of the most central ideas of Kabbalah. It involves the merging of opposing forces and all this stuff through like sexual theurgy, all this different kinds of theurgy. Anyway, yeah, you can definitely see a lot of things though like that. And I think after my exploration of alchemy, you can see a lot of alchemical concepts as well. But again, people look at you like you're crazy if you even mention this stuff, because it involves you have to unpack a lot of this stuff. So I don't think it translates very well for apologetic purposes, because it requires so much contextualizing and education that it's like pretty much pointless to use in any form of apologetics.
@HidBro0 donated $19.99 through Super Chat. It is due to Alice Bailey/HPB/Anglo/American Intel cults evolving existing concepts. They call it SPIN, segmented polycentric.
Interesting. I got to look into that. Thank you, ID bro. I appreciate all the donos, man. Yeah, last one. Yeah, man. I appreciate all that, bro. I got to look into that. I've never heard of the spin concept. Segmented polycentric integrated networks. Interesting. If one cult or group fails, it doesn't matter. cohesion ties or the concepts. Yeah. Well, that's interesting because that's something you also see. Like, one of the arguments I make is that, and I think this applies to Mormonism too, this whole notion of the invisible church that developed in the 16th century, I think, I don't know that you can tie this to one figure, but there are definitely more influential figures in this concept. But it started with, like, I believe, radical reformers. And this is kind of what set the precedence for the materialization of Protestantism in some form. So whether that be the Rosicrucians, which was an invisible college, right? And then how did that material manifest? It did so through Freemasonry. So Freemasonry becomes like the church, the universal church of these esoteric Protestants, right? So they kind of like redivinize the church and give it a new institution to spread the Reformation of the entire world through the Masonic network. And that idea, even after the Freemasons kind of like the influence kind of slowly dissolved over time, that kind of notion remained in these various esoteric sects. There's always been this kind of unifying principle, whether you want to call it enlightenment or whatever, and this kind of like desire for a universal kind of unifying a belief system that manifests in materially in some way. Does that make sense? Or am I kind of just becoming way too immersed in this stuff? Okay. So these are we're looking at the magical parchment. So this is just some of the material on the parchments. So he's got this protective talisman. This is talismans are derived from Jewish magic, from ancient Jewish magic. You can see this in the Bible too, by the way, in the New Testament, Acts 19, I believe. There was all these Jewish exorcists that were selling talismans, and they were, LARPing as exorcists for money. It's a very ancient, it predates Acts by centuries. The concept of the talisman. It's almost like a way of, it's pretty similar to what we're talking about. It's like a physical manifestation of the divine name. It's what contains these magical spells, right? There's always this dialectic of revelation and concealment, and the talisman kind of is a physical embodiment of that. So there's it's a parchment, right? Provenance, according to Gary Smith, a descendant. So this is a descendant of Joseph Smith. He says, my father, Eldred G. Smith, has told me as well as my great uncle, that all these artifacts were brought across the plains by Mary Felding Smith, the widow of Hiram Smith, and that when she died, they went into possession of Hiram's oldest son. That would be Joseph. So we have his descendants actually admitting that. At least that's what the story is. LDS Church, they have patriarchs? Wow. LDS Church Patriarch Emeritus freely admits that they may be Kabbalistic in origin, i.e. linked to occult or mystic writings. That's from Tanner's work. And here's some of the sources that you can find where he derived these parchments from. So Ebenezer Sibley's Occult Publications, the Magnus, and Reginald Scott's Discovery of Witchcraft. So we're going to get into the translation stuff here. This is big. Traditional Mormon narratives describe the production of the Book of Mormon as a divine translation. Several historians and non-Mormon authorities have suggested that automatic writing was the actual method used. Automatic writing is defined as the ability to dictate or write material in a rapid, fluid manner without conscious composition or prior awareness of the content. There are many modern examples of writers who themselves claimed to invoke automatic writing, this is basically, if you to read between the lines here, it's summoning a demon to write for you, to channel. You're channeling a demon to write the demon's words through you. That's essentially what it is. Carl Jung is one prime example of someone who did this. I think his Red Book, a good portion of it, I don't remember how much of it, but a good portion of it he ascribed to automatic writing. He had this, he called it a spirit guide named Philemon. So he had a personal demon that helped him with his work. And as it turns out, Jung also, tons of alchemical and Kabbalistic influence by his own admission, was one of the, I think maybe the primary motivator behind the resurgence of the practice and study of alchemy in the 20th century. He kind of revived the current, and so this stuff was largely for I think probably a few centuries, maybe 200, 300 years. This stuff wasn't really studied. Like it kind of like I won't get too into this. Francis Yates talks a lot about this, but there was a guy in the 17th century, Isaac Casaubon, he was a Protestant, and he found that the Corpus Hermeticum was not as ancient as they thought, and that kind of just like it kind of just like destroyed, at least temporarily, the esoteric studies on a serious level in academia. And so for a while, for a very long time, there was not really as much of a formal academic interest in Western esotericism. As far as I understand, I could be wrong. But regardless, Carl Jung had a major role in the resurgence of academic study of the Western esoteric tradition. So that's why a lot of this research is pretty recent. I have probably close to 100 sources on this stuff, all academic sources, and they're all written roughly around the same time. It's all like, I would say mid to late 20th century that they're written in. So it's all very recent. And so here's some evidence of automatic writing. Process of dictation. Witnesses such as Emma Smith reported that Joseph Smith would dictate for hours at a time without the use of notes, outlines, or manuscripts. I don't know how you correlate that with the simple unlearned boy theory. Upon returning from interruptions or meals, he would immediately resume where he had left off without having any portion of the previous work read back to him. The rapid production, the bulk of the Book of Mormon was completed in approximately 90 days, a pace that is characteristic of the rapid output observed in automatic writing. Like basically this is and I'll show you, if you guys are interested, I'll show you the source this is coming from. I have an article on this. And I think it's written by former Mormons who had access to the archives. But this is what the Mormons look at and say, well, this is proof that he's divinely inspired. Those were angels communicating, and it was really, we know that there were actually demons. Lack of revision. So because, again, this, I would just frame this as like, I don't think this kind of thing is going to be effective for a Mormon in apologetics, because they probably know that there was this divine, or they think there was this divine process in this work that we're looking at right now. So this is just attributing it to automatic writing instead of what the Mormons say it is. The manuscript suggests that there were comparatively little editing or revising done as the work was recorded, which is typical of text produced through automatic process. Now this, I think, is pretty strong evidence that he was doing that, because he was scrying. Scrying is glass looking. All right. This is what John Dee was doing to communicate with, quote, angels, these angelic conversations, they call them, which again are demons. So he was using these crystals to have these discourses with angels and what he called Enochian magic, the Enochian pre-Adamic tongue. So this is the same thing. Stone gazing or scrying. Eyewitness accounts indicate he was reading words or sentences that appeared in the stone, implying an effortless or automatic dictation process. I want to see L. Ron Hubbard fight Joseph Smith. I'm going to be covering L. Ron Hubbard too soon, because there's been a lot of interest lately in Scientology. That guy, I forget his name, he just did a video on, he does all these like documentaries where he just goes to crazy spots and just finds stuff out. I think he did one on, this was the guy that went to India and went to that big festival where they just take these poo baths. And he did one, he published one just yesterday, I think, where he's going around Brooklyn and he uncovers that there's a big scheme among all of the Orthodox Jews there where they're living off of welfare. And he did one on, I think his previous video was on Scientology. He tries to become a Scientology member. So I meant to watch that because it has like millions of views. So like a lot of people are kind of gaining more interest in what the hell's going on with the Church of Scientology. But yeah, L. Ron Hubbard was, he lived with Jack Parsons, and he was like one of his like, essentially like, I don't know what the word is, but in the tradition of Thelema, which was Crowley, he was, Jack Parsons was, a correspondent with Crowley himself. And I think what happened was Jack Parsons like lost, his partner in all of his theurgic rituals, who was his girlfriend or his wife or something like that. And so he needed a replacement, and that replacement was L. Ron Hubbard. So L. Ron Hubbard was a Thelemite. There's so much to that story, so that'll be for another stream. Joseph's practice of placing his face in a hat to look at the seer stone is recognized as a well-documented method of stimulating automatic writing known as stone gazing. Cryptomnesia. These were recall and automatic writing, so it's known as cryptomnesia, may explain how Smith included extensive quotations from the King James Bible and 19th century theological concepts that his conscious mind may not have intentionally studied. And then there's parallels with other channeled text, such as Pearl Curran, who was a known, she was a figure who actually admitted to automatic writing, as far as I remember. It says right here, she documented cases of her own automatic writing. And so Joseph Smith is actually, it says, is paralleling her admissions, right? An unlettered housewife who dictated sophisticated literature under the name Patience Worth. So it's always always under the pseudonym, right? Like Carl Jung literally attributed some of his writing to Philemon. So it's something probably involved with that invocation, where it's like it's like part of the trade-off. The demon's like, you have to credit me or something. I don't know. Some proponents of a free conceptual translation cites the Doctrine and Covenants 9, which instructed Oliver Cowdery to study it out in his mind. However, the sources note that these instructions were given to Cowdery regarding his specific gift of working with the rod. Sounds sus. No, that's another practice we're going to look at. The divination rods they're talking about here, which typically required mental deliberation or yes/no answers, whereas the accounts of Smith's seer stone describe a process of clear vision and effortless dictation. This is a little bit about the brown seer stone. Here's the stone in hat method. Urim and Thummim again. To translate the gold plates, the documentary evidence tells a different story. So this is one of the three eyewitnesses who was in on the process of Joseph Smith gazing into this hat and doing these translations. He says, "I will now give you a description of the manner in which the Book of Mormon was translated. Joseph Smith would put the seer stone into a hat and put his face in the hat, drawing it closely around his face to exclude the light. And in the darkness, the spiritual light would shine. A piece of something resembling parchment would appear, and on that appeared the writing. One character at a time would appear, and under it was the interpretation in English. Brother Joseph would read off the English to Oliver Cowdery, who was his principal scribe, and when it was written down and repeated to Brother Joseph to see it was correct, then it would disappear and another character with the interpretation would appear. How convenient is that? It just disappeared before anyone could verify anything. Thus, the Book of Mormon was translated by the gift and the power of God and not by any power of man. Yeah, I'm sure. And here's another excerpt from Emma Smith, his mother. In writing for your father, I frequently wrote day after day, often sitting at the table close by him. He's sitting with his face buried in his hat. Or I'm sorry, this is his wife, Emma Smith. Yeah. With the stone in it and dictating hour after hour with nothing between us. So he was like a gamer. She couldn't get his attention. He kept, instead of looking at the screen, he just had his head in this hat. Yeah, the South Park episode is great. They still deal with that. They still have to, all the Mormons know about that now, and they still have to deal with people coming to know about Mormon teachings from that South Park episode. It's Scientology as well. They did a great episode on Scientology. I think, I don't remember if it was the Scientology episode. It might have been Scientology or the Mormon episode, where they actually had a disclaimer at the bottom of the screen to say, like, essentially, like, recognizing that it's South Park and it's a comedy show, but they were like, this is what they actually believe. And it was like a ticker on the bottom of the screen, it's like to show that they weren't, BSing. The golden plates, supposedly the ancient record Smith was translating, were not even present during the translation. They were hidden in the woods or wrapped in a cloth on the table. Smith wasn't translating anything. He was dictating from his treasure-seeking seer stone while his face was buried in the hat. The translation method was identical to glass-looking that got him arrested in 1826. We're going to look at that trial, too. A lot was revealed in that trial. Quinn notes the crucial point about the stone itself. The noted Mormon historian B.H. Roberts confirmed that Joseph Smith sometimes used a seer stone to translate the Book of Mormon. The seer stone referred to here was a chocolate-colored, somewhat egg-shaped stone which the prophet found while digging a well in company with his brother Hiram for Mr. Clark Chase near Palmyra, New York. It possessed the qualities of Urim and Thummim, since by means of it, as described above, as well as by means of the interpreters found in the Nephite record, Joseph was able to translate the characters engraved on the plates. The method was not unique to Smith. It was a standard practice among treasure seekers, as Quinn notes. Before young Joseph's was newsworthy, Palmyra's newspaper reprinted in 1825 a significant story from the newspaper of Orleans County, New York. It described the discovery of a treasure by the help of a mineral stone which becomes transparent when placed in a hat, and the light excluded by the face of him who looks into it. This is how treasure seers, including Palmyra's Sally Chase, typically use their stones. Okay, so it wasn't this kind of like interpreted method that Smith himself, came to him in a dream or something. Thus, it should pose no religious difficulty that Joseph's seer stone of his youth was later applied to the higher use of inspired translation by the Book of Mormon. Mormon scholars Richard Van Wagener and Steve Walker analyzed all the eyewitness testimony. Okay, so I don't want to get too into I have a lot on the translations. I don't want to get too carried away with it. I think you get the idea. They're all essentially saying the same thing. And so he goes on trial in 1826 for being a glass looker, a fortune teller. So this is some of the record of the trial by Wesley P. Walters, who provided a documentary proof that Smith was prosecuted as a glass looker. In his testimony, Joseph Smith said that he had a certain stone which he occasionally looked at to determine where hidden treasures in the bowels of the earth were. Joseph Thompson testified that he is certain that a prisoner can divine things by means of said stone and hat, that as evidence of fact, prisoner looked into his hat to tell him about some money witness lost 16 years ago. If I recall correctly, in my podcast episode with my most previous ones, I did 2 episodes with them with Drew on Mormonism. I think he talked about that. In 1971, researcher Wesley P. Walters made a discovery that the LDS Church had long denied was even possible. The original court documents proving that Joseph Smith was tried as a glass looker in Bainbridge, New York, 4 years before he founded his church. Sorry, I'm having trouble reading apparently. So more testimony, kind of the same stuff here. For decades, Mormon apologists had insisted this trial never happened. LDS researcher Francis W. Kirkham had drawn a line in the sand. If such a court record confession could be identified and proved, then it follows that his believers must deny his claimed divine guidance which led them to follow him. Smith would then be a superstitious fraud who used a seer stone to deceive superstitious persons into believing that he had the ability to look into the depths of the earth for hidden treasures. Therefore, Kirkham concluded that no court record was ever made that contained a confession by Joseph Smith that he had used a seer stone to find hidden treasures. So I think these are responses from LDS apologists. Yeah. The court record was genuine. LDS apologists now accept its authenticity. By their own earlier standards, this should have been the most devastating blow to Smith's prophetic claims. Instead, the church quietly moved the goalpost. So, all right, I think that's pretty much enough for that, because I don't want to get too. I think this is a little bit too off topic from the. This does involve an occult ritual, but I think we get the idea here. The LDS Church denied it. Now we know there's a testimony of it, and there's a record of it. This is a little bit about the Egyptian papyri, which is very essential to the translation of the Book of Mormon, the magical papyri. So it's just, more of the same stuff of like forgeries. This is a big point of contention. I've seen entire debates just around this here. I think I'm going to skip that part because I want to get into Kabbalah, his influence of Kabbalah, because that's huge. It explains a lot of their wacky beliefs. Michael Hormer's Joseph's Temple places Smith's fascination with Egyptian materials within the broader context of Masonic and Rosicrucian Egyptomania. Yeah, that's basically all you need to know about this, is that you can just tie that directly to the obsession with, as he calls it, Egyptomania that's involved with the Masonic and Rosicrucian traditions. Thomas Smith Webb taught a role. And by the way, this just reminds me, one of the other figures from the burned over district, I believe, unless he was from, I might be mixing guys up here. Oh, the Millerites were from the burned over district, and those were the founder of the Adventist. I think, forget his first name, but the Miller, something Miller, but the Millerites were the original Adventists. They came from the same place, and I think around the same time as the Mormons. And Miller himself was a Freemason. And then his successor, who I did a stream on early on when I started this summer, I think it's still my most viewed video on YouTube, where I covered Charles Taze Russell, who is Miller's successor and founded the Jehovah's Witnesses. He was buried in an Egyptian pyramid, has his tombstone. So he was equally obsessed, if not more obsessed, with the Egyptian mysteries than Joseph Smith was. You can see it all over his symbology. He had the what is it called? Not the Rose and Cross. There's another Masonic symbol where it's a cross over a pyramid. He had that on his tombstone. So it was probably a very prominent occult theme, especially in the burned over district at that time. That would be my guess. Thomas Smith taught Royal Ark Masons that Egyptian philosophers had concealed their particular tenets and principle of polity under the hieroglyphical figures and expressed their notions of government by signs and symbols. Tombstone also has a Rosicrucian crown cross. Yeah, the crown and cross. Thank you, ID bro. Yo, thank you for another 2, man. I really do appreciate all the support tonight, man. So, all right, we're getting into Freemasonry. What would you guys rather look at first, just in case we start getting caught up in whichever subject we're about to get into? So, Joseph Smith and Freemasonry, or Joseph Smith and Kabbalah? What would we rather look at first here? So, I think we all know that we're at least somewhat familiar with Joseph Smith's ties to Freemasonry. In fact, I think I had it up here where all these images were. This is Joseph Smith's Masonic apron. This is the very Masonic apron he wore. It says it right here. I can't read it. Masonic apron used in the initiation rites is now in the possession of the community of Christ. I mean, that it doesn't even get more Masonic than that. Like I don't think I've even seen a Masonic apron that has that much, like that has all the Masonic imagery on it. Like that's the inside of the temple or the lodge, and it has the all-seeing eye. Like they usually look like the Gmail symbol. I don't think I've seen any that have all the imagery on it like that. That's pretty wild. It's like that literally can't be anything else. Cool dude says Kabbalah. Okay. So then F last name says JS and Freemasonry. Okay. Well, let's try to do both. How about that? Yeah. Everyone knows the Masonry links. I mean, there's, I can guarantee you there's more stuff that you probably didn't know, but I think that we're generally familiar with it. To my knowledge, most of it involves like the initiation rites. So, like, for example, the apron is used in the, what do they call it? The endowment process, in the endowment ritual for the Mormon initiation. It's like the same garb as the Freemasons. So that's not the only thing, though. Thanks for another $2, man. Oh, Lord, there is no help from the widows. Famous last words. There's some interest. So again, I'm going to refer you, if you're interested in this subject, listen to my last podcast with on Mormonism with Drew, because he goes into some of the stuff about his assassination, how there's a lot of mythology around that too. All right. Well, here's a timeline of his Masonic affiliation. March 15th, 1842, he's initiated as entered apprentice Mason, which is kind of hilarious that this was after the invention of Mormonism, because Mormons use this as an apologetic. They don't even deny anymore that he was a Freemason. It's like you can see it on the LDS website. There's a whole piece on his on Smith being a Freemason, right? So they're not, the church itself isn't even denying it. And so the defense I've heard mostly when this is brought up with Mormons is that, well, that was after he became, or that was after Mormonism. It wasn't before. Like, that's better. Like that's even better. If he invented Mormonism, he had this like deeply, divine encounter with like these angelic beings and was given a message from God, and he's a prophet. And then he joins Freemasonry. Like, that's better. It would be much better if he joined before, and then they could at least make the case that he wasn't involved with it anymore. But it's even worse that he joined a Masonic lodge after the invention of Mormonism. That's kind of wild. March 16th, 1842, Smith passed to fellow craft and raised to Master Mason. So he's a Master Mason. Same night with extraordinary haste. That's pretty quick in 1 year. Wait, in 1 day? Am I reading that right? That's wild. Within 24 hours, he went from initiate to master mason. What happened? Then a couple months later, he introduces temple endowment, the temple endowment ceremony. That's what we're talking about. So it completely mirrors the Masonic initiation. And I'm sure you guys have seen pictures of this. They're very rare photos, but you can see pictures of the endowment garb for the Mormon endowment ritual, and it's like it actually looks even more ridiculous than the Freemason garb. Like the Freemason garb goes hard compared to the endowment robes. It looks so ridiculous. Let's see if I can find a picture real quick. It looks like trash. Yeah, here it is. Where is it? Yeah, check this out. This is the and these people make fun of orthodoxy because of how the priests and the clergy dresses. Like they think that orthodoxy looks ridiculous, and this is how they dress. What's that? Another $2 for my D, bro? Thank you, man. And it used to take us around 7 years to hit Master Mason. Yeah, that seems about right. A day is wild. Yeah, this is what these guys wear, and they make fun of Orthodox tradition. Looking like little Miss Muffet. Like, get back to the kitchen, bro. Go bake me some muffins. Doesn't Freemason garb look? It goes hard compared to this. This is just like so ridiculous looking. Like, bro, you're not tough. Stop that. What's with the what is that symbol? I wonder what that's symbolizing. That gesture there. I don't. To my knowledge, that's not a Masonic gesture. That's just some kind of new thing, I think. Anyway, we'll get back to this here. Yeah, that's like one of the, I think there's very few photos that I've seen of that. They're very careful. They allow photography in their rituals and stuff. Yo, what's up, Cleve? So where are we here? 1842. Yeah, the endowment ceremony. All 9 of the initial recipients of the temple endowment were Freemasons. Well, look at that. Homer documents all these parallels. The craft rituals and the endowment included the use of aprons, keywords, a new name, the 5 points of fellowship, signs, tokens, grips. And so that's another thing, the handshake. They use the Masonic handshake. Obligations and penalties, as well as the familiar symbols of square, compass, all-seeing eye, clasping hands, the sun and moon and stars. You can see some of that imagery on their temples as well, the sun and moon and stars with the Masonic compass. ID bro just dropping dimes tonight. Did you ever look at the Mormon undergarments with the square level compass? There is also full Mormon ritual video online. Yeah, I saw that. I think I just saw that the other day. Yeah, and thank you for the 5 again, man. And you're not, dude, I will accept any kind of donation spam as like, that's not spam. I appreciate it, man. Yeah, maybe, let me see if I can find that. I don't want to spend too much time like tracking down that video. So if anyone has it, I don't know if you could post it in chat or on the Discord or something, but I did see that the other day. I meant to save it. If I remember correctly, it was pretty grainy footage because, like, you know, again, you can't just stand in the ceremony with a camera. So I think it was old and it was really shaky. But there's a funny video too of a Mormon going to a Masonic temple for the first time, and he's talking about all this stuff that's like really similar. Throughout the Mormon temple rituals themselves, there were striking similarities with Masonic symbolism, especially those of the York Rite, which was established at the Nauvoo Lodge. The temple garments, very similar Masonic ceremonial garb. Oh, I'm sorry, I just read this. The garment bears a reverse L on the right breast and a V on the left. The reverse L is the Masonic square and the V is the Masonic compass. All right. So yeah, I mean, again, this is no surprise to any of us. Let's get into the good stuff here. So it's mostly, look, this is kind of the same with any of these esoteric influences. It's really just connecting the symbology. Like these people don't say that they're like deriving these concepts from the esoteric traditions. They just hijack them. So you just connect the dots there. There's really no science to it, and it especially lays claim to it, the fact that they were all Masons. So it's like, what else would that be? And here's the response from the LDS Church. There are different ways of understanding the relationship between Masonry and the temple. Some Latter-day Saints point to similarities between the format and symbols of both the endowment and Masonic rituals and those of many ancient religious ceremonies as evidence that the endowment was a restoration of an ancient ordinance. So it's like not really a response. So okay. Now, the reason this is at the end of this document is because the King Follett discourse was towards the end of his life. I believe it was in the last year or two of his life that he delivered this, this Kabbalistic, sermon or whatever you want to call it, discourse. And so this is where this narrative of him being an uneducated farmer just like completely gets dismantled. He clearly was immersed in the Kabbalistic tradition. And so you can see here some of his sources that he had. These were some sources that he had relating to esoteric traditions. The descriptions of Kabbalah as an ancient mystery tradition brought from Egypt and Palestine, right? So they still had that notion of, they didn't know that the Zohar was like a 13th century text. They still, even in the 19th century, were presupposing that it was this ancient Egyptian manuscript. And as we'll see, it's entirely Gnostic. So this gets into a little bit of the article I published today, because I cover a lot of the Gnostic influence of the Zohar, which is the primary. It's like the metaphysics and cosmology of Kabbalah. It's all in the Zohar. It's like the primary text of Kabbalah. And it has some really the whole thing is an anti-Christian polemic. It was literally written by admission of these rabbis and scholars that it was written entirely as an anti-Christian polemic. Beyond literature, occult mentors provided a bridge between academic esotericism and folk magic. Alexander Niebuhr, a converted Jew and reader of Jewish texts, served as Smith's ongoing tutor in Nauvoo, providing a direct link to Kabbalistic thought. This academic lineage extends back to Dartmouth College, where Professor John Smith, a distant cousin and rare book stealer, taught theology and languages. The family's connection to Dr. Nathan Smith, founder at the Yale School and a known resurrectionist, a grave digger for medical study, grave digging for medical purposes only, right, is particularly salient. This resurrectionist background provides a cultural framework for the digging for hidden things, whether bodies for science or golden plates for revelation. Notably, the date Smith claimed to receive the plates, the fall equinox, was the 132nd anniversary of the execution of his ancestor Mary East for witchcraft, a darker historical coincidence that grounds the movement in a specific occult timeline. These intersections provided the necessary vocabulary for the complex theological structures that would follow. By 1842, Smith most likely had touched the subject of Kabbalah in several ways and versions, even if such contracts remain beyond easy documentation. During Smith's final years in Nauvoo, however, his connection with Kabbalah becomes more concrete. In the spring of 1841, there apparently arrived in Nauvoo an impressive library of Kabbalistic writings belonging to a European Jew and convert to Mormonism who evidently knew Kabbalah and its principal written works. This man, Alexander Niebuhr, would soon become the prophet and friend and companion. So here's some evidence of Kabbalistic knowledge. Niebuhr published a Kabbalistic article called "The Jews," a nice title, in Times and Seasons. The article cited over 24 texts and authors, including at least 10 classic Kabbalistic works. So the Zohar, the Mishnah Nilam, right? All these Mishraic texts, these rabbinical mystical texts, and the Zohar is the primary text of Kabbalah. As Owens notes, the general precision of his numerous citations suggests Niebuhr had access to the works he quoted, and by standard, these were unusual works to possess on the American frontier, and certainly an extraordinary collection of texts to be found in the prophet Joseph's Nauvoo. And this discusses his funny name, Gilgul, which is the teaching of the transmigration of souls. Now, I've talked about this before on the stream where I talked about Trump and how the Jews worship Trump because they think he's the reincarnation of King Cyrus the Great. We got some more donos.
At cooldude_5678 donated $5 through Super Chat. To spit on Joseph Smith. His wicked cult deceived a bunch of people I love. Makes me sick with rage. Keep exposing it, Westgate.
Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate the 5, and thank you for the 2 there, ID Bro, again. Endowment vid is in chat. Oh, okay, cool. Where is that in the, we're in Discord? I'll take a look. Yep, I found it. Awesome. Oh, your nodes. I keep forgetting which, okay, now I got it. All right, yeah, let's see if this is, let's pull this up here. Yeah, thank you guys for all the support tonight. It's very warm welcome back. I appreciate it. All right, let's see here. Hopefully you can hear this. Oh, it's an hour and 18 minutes.
Brethren and sisters, we welcome you to the temple and hope you will find joy in serving in the house of the Lord this day. Those of you who are here to receive your own endowment.
This is so creepy. It looks like a horror film director purposely made it like this. This is wild creepy. So this, just from the get-go, this is Masonic. This is the Master Mason standing here at the altar in the middle of the lodge, in the middle of the temple in the lodge. This is like exactly Masonic.
Washed, anointed, and clothed in the garment of the holy priesthood. For those who are representing deceased persons, the ordinances are to appear.
Oh, this is the video everyone talks about that you're not allowed to see.
Form mountains and hills, great rivers and small streams.
Bro, imagine having to watch a video. Like, you're joining a cult. I'm sorry, bro. Like, if you don't realize that the fact that they're making you watch a video for your initiation is a cult, like, you're cooked. How, like, imagine sitting through this is what religion does this, man? Like, oh, you got to sit down and watch a video. It's like Clockwork Orange. They got to open your eyelids and stuff. This is wild.
After its own kind, labors the fourth. The fishes.
What?
Our own image.
Joseph Smith did all that.
You call her Eve. Because she is the mother of all.
Oh, I heard. Okay, so again, Drew told me about this video. Interesting. I didn't know there was a recording of this. He said that there was this wild Adam and Eve video that they make you watch.
That is right, Adam. Because she is the mother of all living. We have organized for you this earth and have planted a garden eastward in Eden. We will place you in the garden and will there command you to multiply. I forbid it. For in the day thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. Remember the...
Why do you need a video of this, bro? Like, just read. Can you just read the Bible? Like, how about that?
There is no other way.
There's acting.
Then I will partake.
This is wild. Wait, why did Adam give Eve the apple?
Now go and get Adam to partake.
What is going on here?
Father to come down, are you? Jehovah.
I remember when Christ rolled out a TV before the 5,000. Yeah. Yeah, like this whole thing depends on like technology. It's so wild.
We promised Adam and Eve that we would visit them.
Right. So yeah, I mean, it's an hour long, but...
The garment which was placed upon you in the washing room is to cover your nakedness and represents the human skin.
Same thing. Okay, this is entirely Masonic.
The sacrifice of the only begotten of the Father. Sacrifice as contained in the Holy Scriptures.
This just mirrors the Masonic initiation. Another video.
John, let us go down.
Bro, Mormon aesthetic is trash.
They're striving to...
This is a whole movie on Adam and Eve.
I exhort you to give strict heed to
It's like one chapter in Genesis. Like, calm down.
counsel and teachings.
This guy probably got whacked for filming this. There's the muffin top.
With its accompanying name and sign. This token is received by bringing the right hand into
Oh,
this
it's Lucifer. Okay.
the hand vertical, the fingers close together, and the thumb extended. And the person giving the token placing the tip of the forefinger of his right
Masonic
hand
handshake.
in the center of the palm, and the thumb opposite
They're
on the
literally
back
teaching them how to do a Masonic handshake.
of the hand of the one receiving it, in this manner. We desire all to receive it. All arise.
Wow.
And everything with which the Lord has blessed you.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do movie nights. Yeah, we could definitely do that. I don't know if this is something that would be like you're gonna sit here and watch this whole thing for an hour, but we can watch stuff. If it's like
Gratitude for thy beloved Son, for coming to earth,
like this is just the qualities is like potato quality, so it's just kind of hard to watch, but it's
to
interesting.
teach us the gospel.
All right, I get the idea. That's cool. Thanks for sharing that. All right, we're going to get back to the text here because I do want to get into some of the teachings. I have one other video that we can watch that's really interesting. So I have a lecture, but we're going to get into that shortly here. Where are we? Okay. So yeah, we're at the King Follett Discourse and the Zohar. Now, this is... I wonder if I should even just play the video because I think this is explaining a lot of what's in here. This is a lecture. I clipped this myself. I think it's about an hour long. You can check it out on YouTube. I don't remember what. Probably just search Kabbalah and Joseph Smith, and you'll find this. There's not many videos on it. And this is at Arizona Center for Judaic Studies. So this is a professor giving a lecture on this King Follett discourse. So I clipped this part because I thought it was the most interesting, the most compelling example of Smith adopting concepts from the Zohar. So what I was I did want to finish my thought on here. I was interrupted by donations. How dare you guys? And I lost my train of thought, but I wanted to because I don't know if he talks about Gilgul, but this is the whole concept that he derived for the reincarnation in Mormonism. It comes from Kabbalah. So what I was saying was I did a stream on Trump as King Cyrus, how all the Messianic Jews believe he's King Cyrus. This is why he keeps getting all these gifts like menorahs and mock Ark of the Covenant gifts. And they think he's the best U.S. president that we've ever had, right? Because they believe he is the literal reincarnation of Cyrus the Great, who paved the way for the Messiah. So they think he's going to, he helped contribute to pave the way to building the temple, right? So they think Trump is like the forerunner to rebuild the temple. And that's besides the point. The point is that they have this belief, and then they also, I'm talking specifically about the Chabad Lubavitch network, because they're all Kabbalists. So they're anti-Zionist, but also deeply Kabbalistic. And their Messiah, what's his name? Rabbi Menashe ben Shmierson. This guy, so that famous video of Trump at his grave wearing the yarmulke, and he's like, shredding up paper or something. It's some kind of Kabbalistic ritual. That's the grave of this guy that he was at. It was Rabbi Schneerson. Okay, I always forget his name, Rabbi Schneerson. And they believe that when he died, his soul was transmigrated, and they're trying to discover who he reincarnated into. They're still like on the hunt for where's the Rebbe, like which person did he embody? Okay, so that all comes from Kabbalah. There's a whole metaphysical framework to describe how that happens. I won't get too into that here because I think that would be getting too in the weeds, but that's in the Zohar. So that's where Smith adopted that from. So now we'll get into this whole thing about the plurality of the name. Was it Adonai? Or Elohim, I'm sorry. So this is all, this is like a huge part of Mormonism, is like they just add an S at the end of Elohim, and it's like, see? So I'll just play this now.
But the place where I think we find the most interesting echo of the Jewish tradition.
Can you guys hear this? I just want to make sure. Is that coming through? Yeah, it should be. Okay. I'm sorry, no audio. My bad. Thanks for telling me. Hang on a sec. How can I get that to play? All right. Well, I'll pull it up on my Twitter because I know that's where I posted it. Unmute, dude. Sorry, guys. One sec. Where did I find that? Okay, here we go. And I'm going to step away for a second. I'll just let this play. I'm going to let my dogs out and I'll be back. I'll let this play because it's like, I think, what is this, 8 minutes? Okay, let me know if
April 7th, 1844, not
coming
long
through.
before Smith's own death, in which he describes the nature of God, his own notion of anthropomorphism, and of apotheosis.
Okay, I hear it.
Or the capacity for humans to become, in a sense, divine. He says, quote, God who sits in yonder heavens, this is based on one of the transcriptions of this text from people who were there. There are multiple transcriptions, again, all meticulously preserved on LDS website. He says, God who sits in yonder heavens is a man like yourselves. That God, if you were to see him today, that holds the worlds, you would see him like a man in form like yourselves. I want you to know the first principle of this law, how consoling to the mourner when they part with a friend, to know that they lay down this body and it will rise and dwell with everlasting burnings, to be an heir of God and joint with Jesus Christ, enjoying the same rise, exaltation, and glory until you arrive at the station of a God. If I should say anything but what was in the Bible, the cry of treason would be heard. I will then go to the Bible. Bereshit, in the beginning. Bereshit is a Hebrew word. Analyze the word. In and through the head. An old Jew added the word, or letter, bet. It read, the head one of the gods brought forth the gods. It's the end of Smith's comment there. So this is actually incredibly similar to one of the most famous passages from the Zohar in Zohar Mantua edition 15a, but similar to many other passages in the Kabbalistic text that describe creation, in which they say the word Bereshit bara, the words Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning, God created. Et hashemayim v'et haaretz, the heavens and the earth. They say what that means is with or by means of Reshit, beginning, he created an entity called Elohim, or God. So by means of Reshit, he created Elohim. And so by means of beginning, he created God, or the gods. The word Elohim is a plural word. And what the Kabbalists take that to mean is that the first Sphira, Keter, meaning crown, together with Ein Sof, uses the second Sphira, which they label as the word Reshit, or beginning, to create the third Sphira, Binah, in the creation of the 10 Sphirot. And that there's a secret code to reading the beginning of Genesis to mean it's about the emergence of the 10 Sphirot, and that God uses them to create other ones, that with or by means of Reshit, he creates these other Sphirot. Now, already within Judaism, this is describing a kind of plurality within the divine realm. And Kabbalists were unafraid of that. They really were very comfortable talking about God in this way. What we find happening in Joseph Smith's version of it is that he said it should really read Reshit, beginning, created Elohim, the gods. So the first God created the gods, and that this is about.
Yeah, his voice. Yeah. Well, look, it's a Jewish academic. I mean, the thing is, it's a lot easier to read Jewish academics. I'll say that much. That's about all I'll say about that. I feel you though, but this is this is good information to get it from a scholar who knows Kabbalah very well. Like, that's why I go to Jewish sources for this stuff, because you can't dispute it. If you have Jewish scholars who study Kabbalah drawing these allusions and saying with certainty that these are Kabbalistic concepts, what better authority to have, right? That's kind of why I go to these guys. So there is that legitimacy, but I know what you mean.
Divinity, the sort of human-like divinity of God, and the creation of humans as a kind, or at least potentially becoming gods as well. So it's similar, but...
And I mentioned earlier about the use of the word theosis. These guys don't know, like, they don't understand the distinction between theosis and apotheosis. It could seem subtle at times, but... on the surface from an academic perspective, I guess, but they just use the term like it's obviously very different, because in the Mormon context, they believe that, like, you can actually see a quote from Joseph Smith where he's almost inverting the quote from Saint Athanasius, that God became man so that man can become God. Joseph Smith inverts it to say that, like, something like God was man and became God so that it's something like that. Like he acknowledged, he first says that God was a man and then became God. So like that by definition is not theosis, because it's like, you're becoming this is like the difference. I'm not going to get, this is getting really complicated, so I won't, I'll kind of digress here, but it seems subtle is what I'm trying to say. But it's a very huge distinction because it involves becoming the nature of God himself. That's ultimately what the theurgic component to the Western esoteric traditions is about. It's about actually becoming God in a very, like ontologically, like you ontologically become God himself, like you're a part of God. So in Kabbalah, it's like there's all these, these shattered sparks of divinity, right? And so part of their deification process involves restoring themselves to God. So they ascend through theurgy and they, become united to God in an ontological way. Like part of his essence. That's the distinction. They become God, like the essence of God. So that's where, these guys are going to throw around the word theosis, and that's just the clarification, in case you're confused about that. It's not the same thing.
Different, right? And that's what we would expect. It's reasonable to assume that through a kind of process of internal prophetic revelation or refinement, Smith was able to expose this famous Kabbalistic text, or through exposure to it, was able to render it in his own really unique way. But Smith says, and it's worth noting in the King Follett Discourse, he says he would be happy to use other sources for describing this particular theological point. But he knows that people will cry treason if he uses anything but the Bible, so he'll use the Bible. I think we can take that to mean that he was comfortable using other sources. But he knows that many of his listeners wouldn't be, or at least the critics of Mormonism, maybe not the people there that day, but the people that would hear it in the future. And so he sticks with the Bible, even though he doesn't think that that's the only necessary source that one can use.
Soylent.
We find numerous other passages in the Book of Mormon, in Doctrines and Covenants, when Smith refers to God.
I'm detecting a little bit of a Skittles lisp. So I don't know if he passes that, but we'll take the information.
God is the endless, Ein Sof. This was a term that was, again, easily located in...
Yeah, and that's pretty damning, that he calls God the endless. Okay, that's not a common descriptor of God's nature in the Christian tradition, but it is how they define the Ein Sof, like, universally in Kabbalah. Like, Ein Sof literally means the endless, I think the literal translation, if I'm not mistaken, is the endless nothingness. That's how they define God.
In the text that I mentioned, this was a notion, if you read about Judaism in something like Allen's Modern Judaism, they use the word modern Judaism to refer to all forms of Judaism after the destruction of the temple. So modern Judaism refers to everything from the Talmud through the Middle Ages and up to the 19th century.
Which is Judaism.
There's also a lot of interest in the theurgic principle, or the notion of human actions impacting the divine realm, because humans have this divine pre-existent soul with the power through priesthood to impact the divine realm and the human realm. So in the Book of Mormon, in Helaman 10:7, but it's also articulated in Doctrines and Covenants 132, it says, quote, "Then they shall be gods, because they have no end. Therefore shall they be from everlasting to everlasting, because they continue. Then shall they be above all, because all things are subject unto them. Then shall they be gods, because they have all power, and the angels are subject to them." And it continues on verse 46, saying,
Yeah, that's a good point. Infinite does not equal endless. Endless can have a start. Yeah, I don't know if they believe in Kabbalah that God had a start, but it's certainly a diversion from the way that Christians describe God. And to his point about modern Judaism being post-Second Temple, that's all of Judaism, right? It's like, do you see the word Judaism in the Old Testament? Do they refer to their religion as Judaism? That starts after the Second Temple. So, even though they had the Talmud, they had like the oral Talmud during the times of Christ, it became a textual tradition, post Second Temple, they started they started leaning heavily on the scribal traditions to transmit their teachings, because the destruction of the Second Temple was very apocalyptic. It kind of like uprooted, you know, it was like they were like, all right, we need to actually, you know, leverage the scribal tradition, because anything could happen now. It's like all these things are kind of uprooting them. And so that's where really it starts with, like, you know, them taking on a larger emphasis on scribal traditions. They start crafting all these Gnostic texts. So, and you can see that I talk about this in my latest article, which is, it's paywalled, but I think the free section, you can see, I'm writing about this, how they drew from in the Zohar. Actually, maybe I'll pull that up after this video. So I'll just kind of put a side note on that.
Verily, verily, I say unto you that whatsoever you sealeth on earth shall be sealed in heaven. And whatsoever you bind on earth in my name and by my word, saith the Lord, it shall eternally be bound in the heavens.
His nasal voice was promised to him 3,000 years ago, O
eternally in the heavens. And whatsoever sins you retain on earth shall be retained.
Yo, what is that? What did you just donate? You guys donating crypto? I think I got another one tonight. I was like, what is that? Thank you, Pat, and appreciate it, man.
In heaven. So again, this notion of human actions.
I just want to get to the part, I mean, this is interesting too. He's talking about the theurgy. So the part about the Elohim.
Worth noting that the idea of the continuous connection between the divine and the spiritual with the material is described, according to Smith, in Doctrines and Covenants 88:41, where he says, and he is above all things, referring to God, and in all things, and is through all things, and is round about all things, and all things are by him and of him, even God, forever and ever. So now, it's possible that this idea could be connected to Jewish mystical texts simply because his exposure to them in English was not something that would have been hard for him to come across. But the number of Kabbalistic ideas that emerge over the course of the Book of Mormon and other writings by Smith is really remarkable. There's also a description, for instance, the three levels of the world in Mormonism, or of the afterlife that we mentioned, the celestial, terrestrial, and telestial. It's interesting that this is described by Neubauer in his article in Doctrines and Covenants, but it's very interesting to note that in Traditions of the Jews by Stalin, the very end of the book cites a passage from the Talmud, from Tractate Rosh Hashanah, in which it notes that when people pass away, they're divided into three camps. Those who are wicked and have to be punished for some period of time, the middling, who will be temporarily punished and then admitted to the world to come, and the righteous, who immediately enter the world to come. So to sum up, I think it's important to note that in a context in which Smith regards himself as restoring a lost religious doctrine, the true revelation from the divine, that it bears a lot of similarities to Jewish mysticism. All
right, so you get the idea. Yeah, that's a good question. Hey, Alderus, I'm gonna actually give you a good amount of info on that, because I was going to share some of my article that I just published today, which goes into that. I just want to make sure I'm done here with the Mormon stuff. So this goes over, let me just switch this back. I'm going to get back to that shortly here. Yeah, I mean, this is basically what he was saying here, the divine plurality. This is like the whole basis of, like, if this gets debunked and the entirety of Mormonism collapses, it's all based on this, like, adding a plurality to Elohim. And it's based on a Kabbalistic interpretation. So the Zohar is, and we're going to get into this, but the Zohar is like the cosmological, like mystical interpretation of Genesis. Kabbalah basically is a mystical interpretation of the Torah. Okay, the Zohar is basically almost entirely cosmological and metaphysical. as far as I can tell. I haven't read the Zohar, and I probably won't, but I've read enough scholars on commenting on it. And it seems almost entirely cosmological and metaphysical. So let me get into my article here. This will kind of explain stuff. Just to make sure I'm done with that. This is just the difference between, I should have showed this earlier. Orthodox theosis and Mormon, what they call exaltation, which seems similar to theosis, but it's not. So that just breaks down the differences. And I think he mentioned all this, so I kind of think we covered all of that. Occult mentors and transmission networks. Okay, there's a lot on this, okay? So I pulled, all this stuff is from like 4 or 5 academic, really dense academic books on this. So to cover this all in a stream is very ambitious. And I hope that we at least got some new info out of this, but you know, it goes into all the figures. So again, I'll just wrap up the research here, but you can check out the books. Let me go to my Zotero here. I have all the books here. So that's going to be from the sources that I just pulled from, Joseph's Temple's Dynamic Relationship Between Masonry and Mormonism. There's one called Equal Rights, the Book of Mormon, Masonry, Gender, and American Culture. The Angel and the Sorcerer. Another one called Mormonism and Masonry. I think this is an older text. Tanner and Quinn, this is a pretty good text. Just Mormonism, Magic, and Masonry. And then this is I would say this is like an essential. This is Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview. He goes through the whole transmission from the Renaissance. And I would say that and the Refiner's Fire, which I had up here earlier in the stream. If you had to get one on this, I would probably get this one, to be honest, from what I've read so far. So again, intersects a lot with my research. He's covering the same figures. He's exploring the same exact transmission. It just arrives at that particular conclusion. This transmission of esotericism through Protestant movements, Protestant sects into the Americas, it becomes very difficult. I had a lot of trouble trying to kind of like pick a spot in the book to stop at, or to like focus on a particular thing that this all kind of culminated into, because it's really a lot of things. It's several things that, I mean, it's probably more than several. It's a lot of things that it kind of developed from it consequentially. So in this case, you know, there's at least 2 books that they're saying that it kind of culminated in Mormonism. So, yeah, so there's that. Let me go to this article here that I published today. I was writing all day yesterday. So it's partly why I wasn't streaming. And I published this on Substack because I was going to include it in my book, and I just couldn't find a place to fit it, because it's a little bit off topic. It goes a little bit more into the Jewish part of things, but it does involve Christianity. So I'll just read like some of the beginning of this. When critics refer to anti-Christian teachings of Judaism, they often point to the Babylonian Talmud. For centuries, the Talmud was burned, censored, and subjected to public disputations designed to expose its heresies, yet often overlooked is the foundation mystical text of Jewish Kabbalah known as the Sefer HaZohar, or the Book of Radiance. And I got to be careful with this. So go on the Substack to read this. Like I said, the first half is free, because I already got a warning on my YouTube channel. I haven't even been doing this for a year, and I got hit with a warning already from just reading word for word from a Father Seraphim Rose lecture. So I mean, I don't want to push it here, but you know, this is, again, this is all from Jewish academic sources. Okay, I'm not really speculating too much. I am doing some commentary, but it's like I'm getting this. The material itself is heavily drawing from academic sources. So I'm just basically explaining the difference between the Talmud and the Zohar here. But basically, the premise of this article is here in the realm of cosmology and metaphysics, core Christian doctrines are woven into a mythological system where Christendom itself becomes identified with the demonic forces of the universe. And the great irony of Western Christendom is that some of its most influential heterodox thinkers of the late medieval and early modern periods syncretized and transmitted this blatantly anti-Christian text. This transmission has gone virtually unnoticed in the annals of history until it gained more academic attention in the 20th century. Now, what this article is about is how the Zohar is a 13th century text that was falsely attributed to this first century rabbi, and it's a pseudepigraphal work written during a time of Jewish persecution, and I think it was during the Inquisition, if I'm not mistaken. But it was, it was in Spain. It developed in Spain, and it was Castilian, and it was written entirely as a polemic against Christians. Okay, so it says, I'm talking about the Renaissance transmission, which again I covered earlier in the stream, so I'm not going to be too redundant with that. But it's talking about how Pico synthesized these doctrines in the Zohar. And then later, Johannes Reuchlin. And I'll read this part here because we were talking about this earlier, Jewish intermediaries. The means by which Kabbalah made its debut into Christian discourse should come as no surprise. Just as Byzantine immigrants had brought Hermetic manuscripts to Italy, baptized Jews, whether sincere or subversive, acted as intermediaries by making Hebrew mystical texts accessible to Latin readers. Many such cases of Jewish intermediaries can be observed throughout the centuries. The most consequential of these figures during the Renaissance was Flavius Mithridates, a converted Sicilian Jew who rendered 3,500 pages of Hebrew and Aramaic mystical text to Latin for Pico. Mithridates consistently interpolated Christological elements by inserting non-existent words, altering passages, or omitting content to make the text appear prophetic of Christianity. Doesn't that sound similar to what Joseph Smith did? And since he had learned Hebrew under Mithridates' tutelage, Pico never gained the proficiency to detect these manipulated interpretations. This means the very Hebrew text Pico used to prove Christianity with Kabbalah had been fabricated to support that exact presupposition. If Jewish sages secretly knew and concealed Christian truth, why did Mithridates have to forge his translations to reveal it? Okay, so it's a little more about Pico here, and it's just, I guess this part I'll read because this is talking about the particular doctrines that Pico baptized, basically, and Christianized. As for Pico and Reuchlin, they were genuinely moved by the Zohar's triadic formulations of the divine that seemed to echo the Trinity, a feminine divine presence that reminded them of the Virgin Mary, and the messianic imagery that appeared to prefigure Christ. Yeah, it's a fake book. Yeah. Who's making a Seraphim Rose movie, and where can I see info on that? I don't know. Who said that? That sounds. Who's making a Seraphim Rose movie? That'd be awesome. Oh, I hope it'd be awesome. Okay, so and then this goes into the what is the Zohar? Okay, how did it come to be? This raises the question of the Zohar's historical legitimacy, which remains one of the most enduring controversies in the history of Jewish esotericism. Perhaps the most damning evidence against its presumed antiquity is found in the testimony of De Leon's wife, or widow. De Leon, just for context, is the who academics believe to be the real author of the Zohar. He's a 13th century Spanish rabbi, Kabbalist, who ascribed the Zohar to Shimon Bar Yochai, who was a 1st century rabbi. So he falsely ascribed it to a 1st century rabbi to make it, date around the destruction of the temple period. And it's really, it didn't come about until 1,300 years later. Thank you again. Another $2 from ID Bro. Like Rothschilds on behalf of Blick Venetian nobility. Yeah. Voice in the Wilderness. Okay. Interesting. The pioneer of modern academic study of Kabbalah established, Gershom Scholem established the academic consensus of the Zohar pseudepigraphal status, confirming that the Aramaic, I won't read all that, but yeah, the most prominent scholar of Kabbalah confirmed that it's a forgery. I agree with Michael Kleiman's argument that De Leon himself might have actually believed he was transmitting ancient wisdom, and that portions of the Zohar could be attributed to the occult practice of automatic writing, as he would write whatever came to his hand. Okay, so here you have a scholar saying that it was probably automatically written, like we were covering earlier with Joseph Smith. But the medieval dating of the Zohar raises another serious question that even most historians of Christian Kabbalah have failed to adequately address. Why was the Zohar written in such a precise time and place where Jewish-Christian discourse had reached its most intense moment? With countless forced disputations, mass conversions, and burnings of the Talmud, Jewish intellectuals, Jewish intellectuals in this milieu couldn't ignore Christianity even if they wanted to, and the evidence suggests that the Zohar's author didn't try to. Now you have this other guy that I heavily drew from, Yehuda Leibs, who is another leading, he's still alive, a leading academic scholar of Kabbalah. So very authoritative figure who writes a lot about the origins of the Zohar and its Christian appropriation. A leading scholar in the Zohar's composition argued that there is no basis to the claims of Christian Kabbalists that the Zohar contains Christian beliefs. Although he acknowledges that they did have certain ground for their claims, for the Zohar does contain many formulations of Christian origins. The crucial distinction is that while the Zohar's author, living in Christian Spain, certainly borrowed and adapted Christian themes, he did not do so out of crypto-Christian sympathy, but precisely to construct a compelling anti-Christian polemic, one that would, in Arthur Green's words, fortify Jews in resisting Christianity. So it's a polemic discourse against Christianity. It's a mystical resistance. That's why I call the article Mystical Resistance. It's a mystical, metaphysical precedence for them to resist Christianity. And then this just goes into some of the Christian doctrines that the author of the Zohar appropriated and made into, Zoharic Jewish themes. And so, when the Christians discovered it, they're like, oh, wow, this proves Christianity, see? And it's like the author actually did that on purpose. Daniel Matt, a translator of the Zohar, notes that while the text rejects the Christian formulation of the Trinity, is strikingly influenced by it, in that certain similarities exist between the Trinity and the Sephiroth. Okay, the Sephiroth, for those who don't know, or Sephiroth, and yes, that is the name of the, one of the characters in Final Fantasy, literally named after the cosmology in the Zohar. The Sephiroth are the divine emanations of the Ein Sof, of their endless, the God of Kabbalah. So that's pretty much all that needs to be said there. There's a lot to unpack with that, but that's the basically the cosmological structure, as Gershom Scholem calls the Sephiroth, the skeleton of the cosmos. Even the 19th century Jewish historian Heinrich Graetz, who was a critic of mysticism, was shocked to find that the Zohar even contains utterances which seem favorable to the Christian dogma of the Trinity of the Godhead. Okay, and then this is just Moses de Leon himself, the author of the Zohar, admitting that, in another letter where he wrote that he's just kind of alluding to it having those themes in there. So I'm just giving more evidence that it was, written under purposely to borrow from Christian themes. Okay. Now this, I think, is where it gets paywalled. So I'll give you guys a little bit of a preview. But this, I believe, is I would even say, to my knowledge, this is probably the most demonic doctrine of Judaism that I have never seen people talk about. So all these people, all these noticers that talk about the how evil the Talmud is, like this is wild, because this is the entire metaphysical justification for the destruction of Christendom. That doesn't appear in the Talmud. It appears here in the Zohar. So again, remember the conditions they're writing it under. They're frustrated. There's a lot of tension between the Spanish Jews and Christians, and they're like, they write this polemical discourse and borrow from all these Christian and Gnostic themes to basically weaponize Judaism against Christians. But in doing so, Christians adopt it because they're like, wow, look at all these Christian themes in here. And that didn't happen until, centuries later, but it happened. This doctrine was considered by Castilian Kabbalists and the author of the Zohar to be the most esoteric of all Kabbalistic wisdom. But no such secrets will remain concealed for our exploration. So, and I'm talking about here how Pico kind of like Christianized this doctrine in his Kabbalistic conclusions, but he deemed it a profound secret and he didn't want to exploit it by publishing it. So he kept it a secret. And so the text that this is based on is another 13th century Castilian text, just like the Zohar, which was written by the Cohen brothers, titled Treatises on the Left Emanations, which scholars credit as the first comprehensive Jewish explanation of the problem of evil using a dualistic cosmology. And so I'll just, instead of reading all this, I'll just kind of explain this in brief without getting my channel nicked again. So basically I'll show you this image. Okay. So this is the inverse of the Sephirot. So I'm sure you've all seen the Kabbalistic tree of life. These spheres here are the Sephirot. These are the emanations. Okay. And the other side, as they call it, or the Sitra Atra, is the inversion of this, and it's the demonic realm. And it's what holds, and because it's dualistic, the demonic side, like the other side, and the divine realm, they both hold reality together. And so this is the entire metaphysical dialectic of Kabbalah. It derives from it derives from Valentinian Gnosticism, really, but they have a whole dialectical model that is like in the ontology of God and their cosmology and everything. And so, yeah, I don't want to show too much here because it's fresh. I'll probably show this sometime later in another, maybe like once it's kind of run its course. But it's just fresh, and I don't want to peer too much behind the paywall here. But it's basically. You guys all, I'm sure you know about Sabbateanism. So Sabbatai Zevi, who appeared as the false Messiah in 1666, that's not by accident, was known for this practice of antinomianism, which is best understood as redemption through sin. So they believed that there's multiple reasons, but like one of the reasons was like they were in the Messianic age and therefore everything is permissible. So it was, of course, all this, sexual degeneracy. They were doing all these orgies and stuff. And so this describes the basis for that, because in the Zohar, in this particular text, in the Zohar too, but the Zohar derives this concept from this text called the Emanations of the Left Side. And in that text, in the Zohar, there's a whole commentary on Job. And their take, the rabbis of the Zohar, their take on Job is that he was an unwitting fool who failed to make a propitiation to the demonic realm to withhold Satan from attacking him. So if Job only made a sacrifice to Satan, he wouldn't have been pestered by him. And this, by the way, Israel Shahak goes into this in his book, Jewish History, Jewish Religion, but he doesn't name the doctrine. He doesn't call it the Sitra Achra. He just kind of like plainly explains it. And when I read it, I was kind of shocked because he talks about how even in the Second Temple period, the Jews were offering sacrifices of bullocks to Satan because it was their way of warding off Satan from bothering them on the Sabbath. So instead, he would go bother all the goys. And that's kind of where the it just developed over time, but like they developed this whole metaphysical framework for it that they call the other side, and so it's all about hastening dialectics. So they believe that by accelerating the dialectical tensions of good and evil, they're bringing about like cosmic redemption. They're balancing the cosmos. And so it involves a descent into the demonic realm to balance out the forces, like the opposing forces. Yeah, it's wild. So, and then it gets into how the other side, and maybe you've seen like the videos of rabbis talking about this, but this is where it's from. It's in the Zohar. It's not in the Talmud, where they talk about how Edom needs to be destroyed because it literally says in the Zohar, it's encoded, but all these Jewish scholars and rabbis are saying that's unequivocal, like that is undisputedly Christianity. They all know that represents Christendom, particularly I think Western Christendom. And so they associate the other side with Christianity. And we know that from the Zohar because, where is it? Here. The sages of the Kabbalah define the current historical epoch as the dominion of the other side, corresponding to the political and religious hegemony of the kingdom of idolatry that is Christendom. Christianity is portrayed as a detestable force of evil that causes Israel to suffer while enticing Jews to convert. Jewish conversion to Christianity is thus described as cleaving to the other side, resulting in the total loss of the soul's portion in the world to come. So there you go. So again, I don't want to reveal too much there. It's, if you want to become a paid supporter, you'll get instant access to that for $9, and you can join the book club too while you're at it. We're currently reading The Language of Creation, Cosmic Symbolism in Genesis by Matthew Pajot, which is a great read. Everyone seems to really be enjoying it. And, you get your money's worth for a $9 subscription. You get a lot of value out of it. 3 years worth of my work and access to an ongoing book club that seems to be growing every day, new members coming in. And our meetings have been really intellectually stimulating, so I really been enjoying those. Anyway, I think that's about enough for us tonight. I think we're closing in on 3 hours here, so I definitely want to thank everyone who supported the stream tonight. Your donations really go a long way. I can't stress that enough, especially during my downtime when I'm doing all this writing on this work that I'm doing, which I'm really dedicated to get out to you guys. I'm really dedicating a whole lot of time. I'm pretty much doing this full time at this point. So that your donations do go a very long way, even when I'm kind of quiet on the side of doing YouTube content or otherwise. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you guys for showing out, and I'm glad you enjoyed this stream of me just reading stuff. Not very visually stimulating, but you guys are you're big-brained individuals, and I think you can really get a lot of value out of just text on a screen because You know, we're here for knowledge, so that's ultimately what it is. But yeah, thank you guys again. I appreciate all of you. I think I'll probably just sign off here. And have a great night, everyone. I love you all. God bless, and we'll see you next week, hopefully. Take care.